Do not flaunt, Ira. You've become my wife. This signifies my parents are now yours too, so we'll get them a vehicle. It doesn't matter how diligently you labored to amass wealth. And before we proceed, please indicate the country from which you are viewing this video. Enjoy the narrative. Irina had always recognized the worth of diligence from her youth. She grasped a straightforward principle: to achieve anything, one must depend solely on oneself. Success will not be delivered to you. She applied herself diligently to her studies, readily embraced challenging assignments, and incrementally, step by step, advanced her professional trajectory. Her resolve and industriousness did not go unnoticed. Irina rapidly ascended the corporate ladder and soon secured a prominent role within a substantial enterprise. Her remuneration was consistent, affording her more than just personal sustenance. With a gleaming complexion, Irina was the company's true jewel, a golden gazelle generously adorned with the riches of her dedication. Alexei entered her existence unexpectedly and swiftly captured her heart with his consideration and attentiveness. He appeared to be the perfect husband, doting, affectionate, and invariably prepared to offer support. In the initial period following their nuptials, Irina felt profoundly content, believing she had discovered her soulmate, an individual with whom she could forge a robust and joyful family unit. However, gradually, akin to a fissure on a flawless mirror's surface, disquieting signals began to emerge. Alexei, almost incidentally, started treating her earnings as communal funds. He ceased consulting her on significant acquisitions, thus operating under the assumption that he possessed the inherent right to manage her income. "We have a shared budget," he would state, disarming her, and Irina, desiring marital tranquility, acquiesced. She harbored the hope that, with time, Alexei would comprehend that her work was not an inexhaustible resource, but rather the outcome of her personal endeavors and commitment. Alexei's parents, Svetlana and Nikolai, also contributed to the shaping of this peculiar financial dynamic. They readily accustomed themselves to the opulent presents their daughter-in-law bestowed upon them. Their son initially offered them modest tokens of affection, blossoms, confectionery, theater tickets, but their desires progressively escalated. They subtly indicated a need for new furnishings, high-end domestic appliances, and at one juncture, Gitz even let slip something more significant. They made no effort to grasp that Irina also experienced fatigue, that she harbored her own aspirations and necessities, and that her professional contributions warranted admiration and acknowledgement. The initial substantial disagreement arose over an automobile. Alexei declared that his parents required a new vehicle and proposed its purchase using their joint assets. Irina demurred, deeming it an excessively costly acquisition with more pressing financial priorities. Yet Alexei remained insistent, asserting that his parents merited a fine automobile. "You married me, which implies my parents are now yours," he proclaimed. These words struck Irina like a harsh reprimand. She felt her perspective held no weight, that she was perceived merely as a financial resource, the golden gazelle obligated to fulfill the desires of its proprietors. It was at this juncture that Irina recognized she had become a veritable cash cow, facilitating a comfortable lifestyle not only for her husband, but also for his parents. This realization troubled her profoundly, yet she remained reticent, hoping for a future where the circumstances might ameliorate, where Alexei and his parents would appreciate the immense effort she invested. She silently bore the weight of her savings, the sacrifices made for their indulgences, and the accumulation of grievances and disappointments deep within her spirit. She still clung to the belief in love and family, in the possibility of finding accord and coexisting harmoniously. Upon returning home after a demanding day at work, Irina felt as though she were shouldering a considerable burden. She deposited the imaginary weight onto the floor and, exhausted, sank onto the sofa. Typically, Alexei would greet her with a smile and an eagerness to listen. Today, however, he was absent, likely having joined his companions at the garage to assist with a motorcycle repair. Irina sighed. Previously, this had not irked her. She had even appreciated his hobby. Now every minor detail seemed to serve as another indictment of his irresponsibility. Alexei returned late in the evening, exuding cheerfulness and contentment. He embraced Irina and bestowed a kiss upon her cheek. "Hello, my dear. How was your day at work?" he inquired, proceeding directly to the refrigerator without awaiting a reply. Irina observed him, and in that instant a stark realization dawned. She could no longer endure this. She no longer wished to be a golden gazelle, and from whose bounty everyone benefited except herself. A few days later, Alexei arrived home with a radiant countenance. "I have fantastic news," he announced from the entryway. "I surprised my parents." Irina grew wary, her heart commencing a disquieting acceleration. "What sort of surprise?" she inquired, endeavoring to maintain her composure. "I purchased them a car," Alexei replied with evident pride. "Precisely the one they've been dreaming of. They will be overjoyed." "You bought a car?" she reiterated, striving to keep her voice even. "With what funds?" Alexei hesitated, clearly anticipating an effusive reaction rather than an interrogation. "Well, I took out a loan," he admitted. "Don't worry. We'll manage the repayments. We have our joint finances." Alexei's words landed like a blow. Irina felt a surge of indignation at his unilateral action, his assumption that her money was readily available for his whims. "You took out a loan without my knowledge?" she managed to ask, her voice trembling. "Oh, darling, don't get worked up," Alexei attempted to placate her. "I wanted to do something special for my parents. They've wanted a new car for so long. And besides, what's the issue? We're a family. Everything is shared." "No, Lesha," Irina stated firmly. "We have nothing in common. You simply take my money and spend it on your desires. You never ask me what I want, what I feel. You are merely exploiting me." Alexei appeared taken aback. He had never witnessed Irina exhibit such assertiveness. She was typically compliant and eager to please. "I do everything for our family. You love me," Irina retorted, a hint of bitterness in her voice. "If you loved me, you would consider my interests. You wouldn't force me into a position where I have to settle your debts. You wouldn't treat me like an ATM." Alexei remained silent, unsure how to respond. He was accustomed to Irina's willingness to compromise and had never envisioned her taking such a stance. "I'm weary of being your golden gazelle," Irina declared. In the ensuing days, Irina felt as though she were moving through a haze. She attended work and fulfilled her responsibilities, but her thoughts were consumed by a single objective: extricating herself from this suffocating cycle. She felt trapped, stripped of her autonomy and voice. Noticing her despondent state, Alexei attempted to mend fences. He presented her with flowers, took her to restaurants, and offered compliments. But Irina remained resolute. She recognized these gestures as superficial attempts to regain her favor and continue exploiting her financial resources. One evening, Alexei announced a family dinner scheduled for Saturday to commemorate the acquisition of a new vehicle for his parents. Irina acknowledged this with a nod, her expression devoid of emotion. Alexei, about to bask in the glow of his perceived triumph, was unaware of the brewing storm. Irina maintained an outward appearance of calm, but internally a tempest raged. She observed Alexei pouring champagne into glasses, his hands trembling slightly with anticipation. Her resolve strengthened with each passing second. Alexei cleared his throat, capturing the attention of everyone present. "Dear Mom and Dad," he began, pausing for dramatic effect. "A small surprise for the occasion. We know you've long desired a new car, and so we decided to present you with a gift." He beamed, expecting a jubilant response. "Irina and I have purchased you a new automobile." Svetlana gasped, her hand flying to her mouth. Nikolai nodded with satisfaction, casting a grateful look towards Irina. "Son, daughter," Svetlana exclaimed, rushing to embrace Alexei. "How wonderful! We hadn't anticipated this at all." Alexei smirked smugly. As he accepted their congratulations, his gaze met Irina's, and he offered her a conspiratorial wink, as if to say, "See, everything turned out perfectly. You were worried for nothing." Irina rose from her seat and retrieved her champagne flute from the table. Her movements were graceful and assured. A hush fell over the room, and Alexei frowned, sensing an impending shift. If I may say a few words," Irina began, her voice steady, as she addressed Svetlana and Nikolai directly. "I am genuinely delighted to witness your happiness. A new car is indeed a splendid present. However, to ensure there are no future misunderstandings, I wish to clarify a few points. She took a delicate sip of champagne, as if steeling herself. Alexei fidgeted nervously. The fact is, Irina continued, the contract for the car's purchase was exclusively drawn up in Alexei's name, and consequently, the loan was also secured under his name. A deafening silence enveloped the room. Nikolai froze, his mouth agape. Alexei turned ashen. What does this signify? Nikolai finally managed to stammer, breaking the unnerving quiet. It signifies, Irina replied calmly, that the loan, being entirely his own responsibility, it must be repaid from his personal funds. Alexei attempted to speak, but the words lodged in his throat. He opened and closed his mouth like a beached fish before finally managing to squeeze out, "But I don't have that kind of money." He stared at Irina with abject horror. "That's wonderful," Irina exclaimed with faint cheerfulness. "This presents an excellent opportunity for you to learn financial management. You've always aspired to be independent." She glanced at the stunned faces of those present. "I believe everyone should be accountable for their actions, and if Alexei decided to bestow such a generous gift upon his parents, he should be prepared to bear the cost." "But we are family," Svetlana shrieked, glaring at Irina with indignation. "We always shared expenses equally." "Yes, Svetlana, you are quite right," Irina conceded. "Unfortunately, I can no longer afford to finance other people's dreams and whims. I too have my own aspirations and plans, and I want my earnings to work for me, not for you." Alexei attempted to regain control of the situation. "Ira, what are you saying?" he blurted out, trying to maintain a semblance of calm. "This is a joke. It's just a prank." But no one laughed, neither Svetlana nor Nikolai, and certainly not Irina. For the first time in many years, Irina looked directly into Alexei's eyes and saw something unusual in them. Not complacency or confidence, but genuine fear. Fear of responsibility, fear of the future, fear of being left alone with his predicaments. "No, Lesha, this is not a joke," Irina stated firmly. "I am no longer willing to play this game. You wish to be a king, so now you shall be a king without a crown, and you will settle your own accounts." She placed her glass on the table, her hands no longer trembling. She felt liberated and empowered as never before. Svetlana and Nikolai exchanged glances, their expressions devoid of pretense. It seemed like some surreal performance, a dreadful nightmare from which they couldn't awaken, but this was reality, and Irina herself had just penned the script for this dramatic climax. Alexei, still pale from the dawning realization of his error, regarded her with the look of a cornered animal. Svetlana and Nikolai, having recovered from their initial shock, exchanged anxious glances that clearly conveyed their condemnation of their son. Irina picked up her handbag from the back of her chair. It was a cherished accessory, a gift, the culmination of a successful, intricate project. Not long ago, Mazarina had felt a pang of guilt when purchasing something extravagant for herself. Now, gazing at the handbag, she felt a surge of pride in her accomplishments and a renewed sense of self-assurance. It symbolized her independence, her right to control the wealth she had earned. Alexei, as if jolted from a stupor, lunged to stop her, leaping from his seat and grasping her hand. "Ira, where are you going? What are you doing? This is some kind of ridiculous joke." His voice trembled, betraying his panic. He had never encountered Irina exhibiting such decisiveness, such coldness, and such unapproachability. He was accustomed to her gentleness, her readiness to yield, her unwavering desire for peace. But now, a completely different wife stood before him. Her hand remained within his grip, her gaze steady and composed. Not a trace of their former warmth, no hint of jest, lingered within it. "Lesha, this is extremely serious. You assumed I would continue to overlook your antics. You believed I was an inexhaustible wallet from which you could endlessly draw funds without seeking my permission. You were mistaken." Her voice was quiet, yet each word struck like a lash. For the first time in their entire marriage, she spoke to him as an equal, not as a subordinate. He was accustomed to her silent acquiescence, her willingness to defer, but now she made it unequivocally clear that the game had ended. You desired control over my finances, Irina continued, meeting his gaze directly. Now, attempt to manage these debts. Let's see how you navigate this predicament. Alexei tried to defend himself. Ira, wait, let's talk. We're a family. We'll resolve everything. She allowed him to finish. The family? She scoffed. You behaved as a consumer, not as a family member. You concerned yourself solely with yourself and your parents, disregarding my feelings and desires. I am fatigued by this. I am weary of being your gazelle. She turned to Svetlana and Nikolai, observing not sympathy, but outright condemnation in their eyes. They had grown accustomed to her generosity, and now she was denying them their usual comforts. And to you, Svetlana and Nikolai, Irina declared, I wish to state that I will no longer subsidize your comfortable existence. That is Alexei's responsibility now. He will attend to your needs himself. Congratulations on the car purchase. I hope you enjoy it, as you will be the ones financing it. Svetlana attempted to interject. But Mom... No. Svetlana, Irina cut her off. I am not your daughter. I am your son's wife, yet you never treated me as a family member. You perceived me solely as a source of income. Nikolai, his gaze fixed on the floor, remained silent, unwilling to meet Irina's eyes. He understood she was right, and that they themselves were responsible for the current situation. They had exploited her kindness and generosity for far too long, and now the reckoning had arrived. Irina turned towards the door. For a final moment, she looked at Alexei. In his eyes, she saw despair and utter confusion. He comprehended that he had lost her, and that this loss was a direct consequence of his own errors. Goodbye, Alexei, Irina said softly. I wish you the best of luck with the loan repayment. Without awaiting a response, she exited the apartment. Behind her lay the shattered illusion of her idyllic marriage, her former life reduced to rubble. Yet ahead lay a new existence brimming with possibility and hope. As she stepped outside, Svetlana's muffled voice echoed, Lesha, and how are you going to pay for this? Irina let out a silent chuckle. Let them navigate it themselves now. She had no intention of squandering her life solving other people's problems any longer. She was on her path, breathing in the air freely. Her first action was to lease a modest yet inviting apartment in a different sector of the city. No lingering memories, no ties to the past. Light-colored walls, expansive windows overlooking a verdant park. Everything here resonated with a sense of renewal. She transferred funds from their joint account to her personal one, and ensuring that substantial payments towards the loan would still be made. Justice, it seemed, had finally prevailed. Though delayed, she stepped into her new dwelling. She surveyed the space. It was empty, but this void did not intimidate her. Rather, it beckoned. It was a blank canvas upon which she would inscribe her own narrative. Meanwhile, Alexei was confronted with a stark reality he had never even contemplated. The bank persistently pursued repayment of the loan. His parents badgered him. How will you pay for this? That question echoed incessantly in their voices. He attempted to contact Irina, pleaded for her return, and made promises of self-improvement, but she remained unresponsive, weary of his empty assurances. He visited them. Svetlana greeted him with chilling indifference, and Nikolai, engrossed in his newspaper, feigned ignorance of his presence. The end, Svetlana declared. Lesha, how could you let her go? Alexei made excuses. I wanted the best for you. I wanted to please you. You pleased yourself, Nikolai remarked sarcastically, without diverting his gaze from the newspaper. Alexei realized that in his parents' eyes, he was no longer a triumphant figure, but an unloved son, an abuser who had failed to meet their expectations, burdened by his debts and a shattered ego. One evening after work, Irina entered a small, charming cafe in close proximity to her new residence. She ordered a glass of red wine and settled at a table by the window. She raised her glass and savored a slow sip. The wine's flavor seemed particularly rich and delightful. She reflected on the feeling of denial, and of self-deprivation experienced previously to please Alexei and his parents, much like she had once curtailed her own pleasures to purchase them costly gifts, deferring her own aspirations for their comfort. Before, she mused, I thought I couldn't leave. A sudden laugh escaped her. How mistaken she had been. Leaving had been agonizingly difficult, excruciatingly painful, but it was the only path to self-preservation. She finished her wine, exited the cafe, and headed home. The rain had ceased, and a luminous moon now graced the sky. Irina gazed upwards, her heart swelling with a renewed sense of hope. A new chapter awaited her, a life rich with potential and adventure, a life where she alone would steer her destiny, and she found this prospect immensely appealing.